afternoon, and good night. My name is Lee Kai Wu, and today I'm joined by.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. My name is John Atanacio, and I'm joined
Welcome,
by
John. Welcome, John.
Kome.
How are you doing this week?
Pretty good, pretty good. Um,
Yeah?
this week's book was pretty insightful, so that got me through the week.
Oh,
Um,
really? You read books every week? Well, tell me
oh
more
yeah.
about that.
Um, so me and my friend Lee Guy Wu, he,
Oh, that
we
rings a
actually
bell.
decided to read a book every week because we both
Hmm.
had a bunch of books that we wanted to read, but
Hmm.
we were kind of feeling not lazy, but didn't really have that much motivation to actually pull through with the goal of reading a lot
Hmm.
of books. So we said, why not make it a mutual goal so that we can
Mm-hmm.
both have apply good constructive good
Hmm.
constructive pressure on each other.
Yeah. That Rikai dude sounds like a good guy. So,
Yeah, he can be.
so what did you guys read this week?
Joe, mine better than you.
I'm Rikai. Oh,
Oh my god.
oh, actually, hi guys. Yeah, I'm Lika. I'm actually the co-reader of this week or every week. Um, and to this week we read the book, or actually, sorry, there's actually some housekeeping to do. Um, the
That
first thing
segue
is,
though.
the first thing is, yeah. So actually, yes. So there are some. No, I just want to say, if any of our listeners are interested in joining us for our podcast, we welcome. Please feel free to. And I know it sounds like a some there's like pressure to prepare your material or like questions and all that so on and so forth. But we invite you even if you would like to just sit in and like listen in as a live audience member, and if there are questions, it's also a great place to kind of like ask each other on the spot. And so we wanted to kind of reach out and tell everyone, invite everyone to join us. And we had thought of different social media or mediums to for everyone to let us know. And easiest for YouTube would be in the comment section. And then, but otherwise, we are going to be creating a Twitter account. And so that anyone who follows us will be able to kind of message us or inbox us, or I don't know what the word is, just message us, and then we'll probably share the tag, or what's it called, name tag, or the username on either description of Anchor or Spotify or YouTube description. So please find us there, and if you would like to join, please join us.
Hmm.
With that said, I'm wondering, John, what book did we read this week?
Good question.
Mm.
Actually, this week we read a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
All right, tell us more about it.
After this short break.
Ah, got it.
Okay, so as usual, I'll start off with the summary of the book. So this week we read The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, who's a contributing editor of Outside Magazine and the author of 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller Lance Armstrong's War. This book, The Culture Code, investigates the characteristics of highly successful groups or cultures. And normally, a culture is understood as a noun that describes the values and characteristics that a group has, but Daniel Coyle suggests instead to interpret culture as more of a verb. As he says, culture is a set of living relationships working toward a shared goal. It's not something you are, it's something you do. Group culture has more to do with what teams do than what they are. So the example he starts off in the book with is the marshmallow spaghetti tower competition. So in this competition, groups of 4 were assembled from organizations from all over the world and were challenged to build the tallest possible structure with 20 pieces of uncooked spaghetti, 1 yard of transparent tape, 1 yard of string, and 1 standard-sized marshmallow, which had to be placed on the very top of the tower. So the first group of performances that were compared were between a group of business school students versus kindergarten students. And normally you would bet your money on the business school students, judging by their relatively mature level of intelligence. But if we take a look at the results, the business students averaged 10 inches tall, while the kindergarten students average 20 inches tall. So the reason behind this counterintuitive result lies in the way both group approach this task. So the business school students went with a rational and socially oriented method, which he coins the term status management, which is a method where they think about how they fit in a social structure and what type of role they can fill in the group. And on the other hand, the kindergarten students went with a quote unquote try a bunch of stuff together method, which is a much more experimental and goal oriented method. So Daniel Coyle says, we focus on what we can see, individual skills, but individual skills are not what matters. What matters is the interaction. And he closes by stating that groups of ordinary people can create a performance far beyond the sum of their parts. And after investigating many extraordinary groups, the author proposes that there are 3 main skills in building strong group cultures, which are number 1, build safety, number 2, share vulnerability, and number 3, to establish purpose. Regarding building safety, safety is important because it's the foundation of building a culture. Without safety, all of the time and attention of the group will be allocated to peripheral problems instead of the problems that you would want to solve to improve the group activity. And there's an essential variable when establishing safety, which is called the belonging cue, which are subtle psychosocial cues like eye contact, body language, and vocal pitch. And there are 3 characteristics of these belonging cues that make them powerful, which are number 1, it enhances the energy invested in the exchange. Number 2, it treats the individuals as unique and valuable. And number 3, it signals that the relationship will be sustained in the future. And the reason why these are important is because humans are deeply wired and obsessed with sensing danger and crave social approval from others, especially superiors. And as a result, humans tend to be more prone to danger or negative signals in general. So it's easy for us to feel isolated or not safe. However, a sustained flow of belonging cues converts this danger that we are so sensitive to a sense of belonging, which leads to a sense of safety. And one example that encapsulates this safety principle is the bizarre event that happened on Christmas Day in 1914 at the Flanders trenches during World War I. So the British and German soldiers were relentlessly fighting against each other in muddy trenches, and because the trenches were so close to each other, they managed to kill hundreds of men every day. But this physical proximity of these trenches ended up producing belonging cues. And the way this happened was that because they were so close to each other, both sides could hear and smell when the opposing troops were cooking or organizing their troops. And as they realized that their life rhythm was similar to theirs, they started feeling that the other side was experiencing similar stresses and weren't as different from them as they thought they were. And on Christmas Day, soldiers from either side started calling and responding to each other's Christmas tunes, and also climbed out of their trenches and approached each other in a friendly way, and ended up celebrating Christmas together on in the muddy trenches. So the proximity of the trenches made them enemies at first, but it also provided enough flickers of belonging cues that set the stage for a deeper level of connection. The second principle is to share vulnerability. Sharing vulnerability can be more important than trust, as vulnerability doesn't come after trust is established. And instead, Daniel Coyle says, exchanges of vulnerability are the pathway through which trust is built. And highly successful group cooperation is built by repeated patterns of sharing each other's vulnerabilities. And not to mention, it also establishes safety as a result. An example that the example that encapsulates this is the U.S. Navy SEALs log training. So this log training delivers strong doses of pure agony for extended durations and demands highly coordinated maneuvers through difficult courses. And this interplay of vulnerability and interconnectedness among the soldiers is seen throughout the training program, and it generates thousands of micro events that build cooperation and trust. And as Daniel says, being vulnerable together is the only way a team can become invulnerable. The last principle is establishing purpose. So Daniel Coyle says, high purpose environments provide clear signals that connect the present moment to a meaningful future goal. So it leads to greater performances and a better sense of belonging as a whole. An example is the Mountain Medical Center in 1998, where Harvard researchers found that the inexperienced team from Mountain Medical Center learned a surgical technique much faster than an experienced team of Chelsea Hospital, which is a very esteemed hospital at that time. And this Mountain Medical Center team's narrative was constantly reinforced, which was to help serve the patients better, while the other team, the Chelsea Hospital, only focused on acquiring the skill. So this shows how important setting purposes are in a group setting. And regarding different types of purpose, in the book he talks about proficiency and creativity as different methods of establishing purpose. For people that want to establish high proficiency, he says that the leader should focus on having members know and feel exactly what to do, while on the other hand, for creative purpose settings, he advises people to have people discover that for themselves. And I think we'll get to more specific examples in our reflections. So I'll stop right there. But he ends each section by posing guidelines that help us readers implement these key points into our lives. And since there's quite a lot, we will be bringing up the ones that we liked the most in our reflections.
Okay, hi everyone. Alright, so we're back, and we will move on to the reflection section, and we will have, first of all, state our ratings for the book, and then each of us will talk about our opinions. So I rate this book out of 8.5 and out of 10, and then my testimonial for this book is a book I will go back and read again, mainly because it's hard to apply the concepts or the ideas or call to action, like actions that he suggests right now. Mainly because I guess a lot of it depends on your ability to be more on the leader side role. I know he mentions that leaders don't necessarily have like the stereotypical traits of leaders and like have to be like the best at everything or whatever. but still, it's still kind of hard. We don't have, or at least for me, I don't have that many teams or groups that I lead. So I think it's good to know these ideas right now, and but in the future, I want to be able to go back and read the book again and apply it there, then and there. But nonetheless, I wanted to talk about. So I'll go through kind of each chapter, and then like I'll pick out the ones that were interesting to me. And so I was starting off with the building safety chapter, or yeah, chapter one. Um, I realized how building safety is so important, especially if your team is has a exploratory or experimental or yeah nature. So if it's like, I don't know, like if it's an R&D, like research and development department, and there's a lot of like lot of tests 違うなんだっけ trial and errors, or like just kind of testing things out and then seeing what works and what doesn't work. And building safety is really important because it's hard to feel like your team has your back and feel safe when you're out there trying to do like things that are bound to fail. And so I just kind of connected that to teams that rely on innovation. I feel like it would be more important to build that safety net for those people. And then I really like the marshmallow example that John mentioned because sometimes we just kind of have to go back to like our kids stage, and like we don't care about whether we're safe here, like what's our future with these people, like are there dangers like lurking around. It's just be yourself and do what's focus on what's important and not about your like social cues, which it was to me it's just like obvious, but like wow, like that's so true. Like let's not forget on what's important instead of worrying about your status or reputation. So it's just a good reminder there. I also liked how in one part of the book it's still under build a safety chapter, they talk about an NBA coach called Greg Popovich. And I've oh sorry, my audio sorry, my headphones just not working. Do you mind talking, John?
Um,
Oh, okay, I can
Good.
hear you. Okay, I'm good.
so yeah, basketball coach.
Yeah, basketball coach. And I follow him, for the longest. Like he's really famous within the NBA
Oh
field
wait,
too.
can you
NBA.
can you can you actually like set up before like the basketball part? Because I think it's like cut right in between as you were
Okay,
talking.
okay, okay. Okay. じゃあ 3, 2, 1.
Mm.
Okay, 3, 2. And then I like how in the same chapter under build safety, David talks about Greg Popovich, which is a famous NBA coach, um, and I really like his form of like coaching and like loving. And even David mentioned in the book, he says a lot of coaches can yell or be nice, but what Pop does is different. He delivers two things over and over. He'll tell you the truth with no bullshit, and then he'll love you to death. And so it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Coach Popovich focuses on what's important, as in he'll tell you the truth with no bullshit, and he's kind of following the kid's mentality there. But then he'll love you to death, and so he's still building that trust for you to fall back on, and like they know that the players know that he still has their back at the end of the day, even though maybe he'll yell at them. But really really lovely example there. I little want to touch on showing vulnerability first. By the way, this is still under build safety chapter. I'll mention it when we move on to show vulnerability. But John talked about building trust, and I guess this kind of does touch on vulnerability. But I realized that when I talk to people about taboo like topics like finance, or sex or relationship or anything personal and that could be sensitive or touchy, I realized I still have this bad tendency of asking the question because I love really openness and transparency between in conversation. I ask them, but I mean, and rightfully so. They feel hesitant to respond openly, and so what I do is I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, sorry, I asked you that first, but here I'll tell you a little bit about my own stories relating anything like finance or relationship or whatever, and then after that, I guess I mean obviously they feel more comfortable and they open up, and then they are more comfortable telling me their stories too, and so I see this happening just not even team basis, right? It's like this is a personal basis, one on one, and I thought it was funny to make that connection there. Not funny, interesting. Um, the next point is about previewing your future connections with your buddies or with your teammates to build safety. And then so in this part, it's just genuinely talking to your teammates and saying, oh, like, oh, it would be nice to be at this point or like win the championship, for example, for the NBA. Kind of like discussing about this helps you to envision it and then build more bond. That's what David is talking about. And I kind of, I don't know if it's a close enough example, but John, like 2 years ago, I was still not in grad school, and I was like, oh, Northeastern grad school will be cool. And then John, you were like, oh, like going, was it
Emerson.
Emerson University to study art is also cool, and like how we could be in the States and like stuff like that. And then I thought that was kind of nice. Well, it's kind of like both of us, not it's like not daydreaming, but like being or dreaming about our future together. And I found that I tend to do that with people that I'm close to. So I think David is on something.
Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. Daniel. There you go. Daniel there. John, I'll rely on you with all the editing after this. Okay, and then Daniel. And then next point was saying or overdoing thank yous and over communicating your like a listening attitude, she said. And I do this a lot, especially now because everything's remote and people can't see your whole body and gesture and body language. And so whatever's showing in my camera, I try to raise my eyebrows, nod really enthusiastically, use my hand, or lean in. Like I think that still works. Leaning in works in real life too, but like I think leaning in works like in video too, to show that you're there and that you're interested in what they have to say. So yeah, I try to focus a lot on showing that in real life or through Zoom. And yeah, so and then the next point, there's one point saying Daniel talks about hiring meticulously and eliminating bad apples in a group. And I don't really have any experience hiring people, but I am really sensitive to bad apples when they join whatever group I am in. And so from a different perspective, from a, I guess, recipient end, I can understand what Daniel was talking about. So, and he also talks about ensuring everyone has a voice within a group to build trust. And I like to think that I do a lot of this when I'm in a group setting with people, and I tend to ask questions that are, like I mentioned earlier, personal or a little thought provoking, some like deep, I could say, but that's kind of like I don't know. Anyways, so when I ask those questions, I try to ask for everyone to everyone, And John, if I ask you first, and I'll be like, okay, what about you, Ashley, who joined us last week? I was like, and then after Ashley, I was like, oh, what about you, John? And so I think that helps a lot with people feeling included. So that's one thing I try to do. Yeah, and then the next point is capitalizing on threshold moments to build trust. And so, and he goes on and talks about there are points so these threshold moments, when you first interact with as a new group, there's gonna be a point of first vulnerability and first disagreement. First vulnerability is the point in which there's an opportunity for anyone in the party to open up and be vulnerable and share some weaknesses or whatever. And Daniel says this is a crucial moment, because depending on how you act, you can either look like you act strong and have nothing to hide or no weaknesses to show. That's one characteristic. And the other one is I am full of flaws, but I am really comfortable with you to share enough to share with you. And there's like this little fork in the road, like you're gonna go either direction. And so it's a really crucial moment to have everyone be on the same track, or be everyone to feel that everyone has nothing to lose, or like is welcoming and really willing to share their vulnerabilities. And this kind of format translates over to first disagreement, when there will be a time when you disagree with each other, but the important part is whether you become someone that does everything to prove that you are in the right, or like that you're right. And or that's the first personality, or the second personality is someone that's willing to let go of their ego and say, yeah, you're right, and I'm wrong, but I don't care about that, because all I care about is getting to the truth and getting to what makes us better. And so Daniel is saying these two moments, first vulnerability and first disagreement, are key to cementing or planting the seed of we are safe here. And so, it just kind of relates to first impressions, but it emphasizes even more the importance of first impressions and how we have to be careful with our behaviors. And I'm pretty sensitive, or I'm pretty careful with my first impressions. My behavior when I first meet, especially in a professional setting, I think I tend to be more reserved and conservative, and try not to step over the line. And and sometimes that makes things awkward, or I feel like I'm just being too quiet, or like rude. Could be seen as rude, but I don't know. Daniel talks about these threshold moments too, so I feel like maybe it's not too bad to be careful about my first impressions. I mean, it's not, but modestly, just do everything in modest. Yeah. You guys know my English. And then last part about building trust is picking up trash. So this is the catchphrase that Daniel coined. Oh, John, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Where higher up, like executives he gives an example of higher up executives picking up trash for in the company, also having no priorities or executive parking spots in the parking lot. And these emphasize the idea that we are all in this together, and that like I'm no better than you, and we're all in this to just get the work done, and we don't really worry about hierarchy. And that that reinforces the idea of building trust. So I thought that was cool, and I definitely want to do that if I ever become a manager in the future, and like do the dirty work for my team. って思ったね。And then moving on to sharing vulnerability. So I think there's one, so I really love this sharing vulnerability, and I want to mention this one. So I actually made a blog post before about what instructors and teachers and professors, any instructor, what they can do to improve their classes, and this is from a perspective of like a student, like pretty much a lifetime student, and I don't have any much experience in teaching, although I did have teaching assistant experiences. But I think the best way to show vulnerability to students is to say, hey, tell me what you want me to do and I'll help you. As in, and they do that right now in, I mean, I think a lot of places, like in surveys, at the end of the semester or halfway through, you send out surveys and ask, hey, like, what's wrong with how we're doing? And so this is kind of now reiterating what I talked about in the blog post, but I think that's first of all, too late, and too disconnected from the instructors. And I mentioned earlier, but like, it's a survey. There's no person-to-person connection, and that as a student, I don't see the effort from the teachers and instructors to try to do better for you. And I know this has scalability problems because there's universities where 700 students, and of course that's, in those cases, surveys work a lot. But in classes like less than 30 students, I think it's definitely doable to plan out different one-on-one sessions with students and ask, hey, what can I do for you? And this, I guess now I'm kind of trying to prove 2 points. One is that it improves the feedback cycle. If you do this on a weekly basis, you can already immediately apply it to next week or the week after, and so on and so forth. And I think that's important because each semester, even though they're different, they're students at the end of the day. They're different students that come in the next semester than the semester after. And so even if you make one change for the next semester based on the original first initial semester, it might not work for the next semester. And so what's important is to apply those feedback that you receive immediately in the same semester. I think that's going to be important for students. But that's just kind of like more on the logistical end, and it's not really about vulnerability. But now I'll move on to vulnerability. And when you do say, hey, tell me what you want me to do, I will do anything to help you, because my success is, I mean, your success, as in the student's success, is my success. If you can communicate that, they will feel like the teachers are in it for them. And I don't know, John, but I'm sure you felt this too, but if the teacher shows enough interest in your success, your effort in the class kind of just is a totally different game changer, and it skyrockets. I definitely felt that. And when teachers don't care, like, why should I care? And it's an unfortunate, like, a reaction, chemical reaction, but it is what it is. So if we can prevent that by asking, be more candid and open, I think this is one way to do it. Were you gonna say something?
That's similar to the classroom example we had in the book David and Goliath.
Yeah.
Where the students were quote unquote misbehaving by doing cartwheels across the room and whatnot as soon as the teacher started reading a picture book. But in reality, this happened because the picture book involved a student reading along with a single student going to the front of the class and reading the book together with the teacher. So it was a one-on-one interaction compared to a full classroom interaction. So that just tunes out the students. So it's like, I think the key thing is that just attitudes get reciprocated regardless of your status. And yeah, that reminded me of that. Yeah.
Definitely a really important part. But yeah, I'm done ranting about instruction or the feedback cycle. But moving on, to share vulnerability, Daniel talks about delivering the smallest of negative feedback in person. I think people try to follow this. I still need practice doing this. It's because it's difficult to confront people with negative or tensed topics, so I still have to practice this. But passive aggression is inevitable or really difficult to avoid when you're texting someone with bad news. So I think that's where this it's more about, I guess, general etiquette. I'm not sure how it exactly connects to vulnerability. I think it connects in vulnerability in terms of like, because in-person feedback shows more like I was talking about, nonverbal cues that are more indicative of you care for them, and it's hard to communicate that message if you are texting, and I think that's where he's getting at. Oh, would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, it's also harder to read what the
Yeah,
other person's trying to say.
yeah.
It's kind of like the um, what Cal Newport was talking about, how liking is only one bit of information.
Mm.
Um, a text message can be a lower resolution of what you actually want to say, so
Yeah,
it can lead to
yeah.
misunderstandings and miscommunications, and that's not what you want in a group setting.
So and so really respect and admire people that use. I think some people might sound make some people think exclamation marks or points are informal or kind of like weak or like, I don't know, like soft, but I think it's a great way to over communicate that excitement, enthusiasm, just because text is so bland and like, yeah, sure, that's okay, period. I do that to you, John, sometimes. I know you know how I talk, so I trust your interpretation. But like for a lot of people, it's like I'm really sensitive to that too. So I really enjoy talking. So I really enjoy talking to customer support, customer reps. Especially like email or chats. When I tell them, hey, I have a problem, they're like, hi, Link, I hope you're doing well. Uh, my name is like blah blah blah. I'm here to help you. Thank you so much for waiting. And I know, yeah, that's like out of obligation for them, but it's nice to hear that. And so like if it's nice to hear that even from a customer representative, how much nicer is it to hear from a friend or your family member? So I think it's a good tool to communicate your vulnerability. So it goes up. And yeah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky topic because, like you said, people can be sensitive, and people can, on the other hand, utilize this low resolution to their advantage. So it really depends on the situation.
Yeah, no,
But
わかる。
なんだろうね. Yeah, but as people who grew up with this digital communication, I think it's easier for us to read past the low resolution because we know how it feels to send it. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to add that we might be more native.
So, which works against us?
So I think I'm somewhat against him saying keep your negative communications in person, because
Okay.
I feel like people who grew up with it can understand how severe or the significance of just text messaging, or like can read between the chats in a sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I started to, even though I'm sensitive and still sensitive, I started to understand people don't mean harm or bad when they say yeah, period. It's like, it's simple, concise way of communicating. And but then, like, because don't you sometimes meet people that have plain text, but when you meet them in person, they're really like bubbly or like energy or so lively. So yeah. I try not to get influenced by it too much. Yeah. So it kind of goes with your point of I'm getting used to it too.
Mm.
And so it's not necessarily, so John's saying, you're saying we can be elaborate with our text, but I think I'm saying now is like I became a little bit more resilient or numb to the
Right.
lack of life in text. So
Adaptive
yeah,
in a
I'd
sense.
say at the end of the day, we're kind of going both at the same direction of
Yeah, yeah.
we're adapting to texting.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you talked about customer support and talked about
Mm-hmm.
how bubbly they are. I recently had
Mm-hmm.
to contact customer support for Adobe. I'm not trying to like throw them under the bus, but their customer
Mm-hmm.
support was so passive. Like
Yeah.
I was trying to switch plans from
Yeah.
my Creative Cloud to a photographer plan
Y-
because it
Yeah.
was cheaper and I didn't use most of the applications on Creative Cloud. So
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I was talking to them on how to make that change because apparently you have to like cancel it once and then subscribe again, but they
Mm.
offered me like a method of just doing that seamlessly. But in the
Mm-hmm.
process, it was like who spilled your milk this morning? Like it was so it felt like he didn't like his job.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
affected my mood because I'm also sensitive to that. Although I try not to like have those influence me.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, it's so like you said, it is a good tool to use to like just give them like a positive vibe on the surface,
Yeah.
especially for people that you don't really know. Um yeah, like customer support or just like first time people that you're talking to.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to make the connection between their actual attitude versus their surface level communication
Yeah.
to
So,
fully
so, so,
understand
so.
what they're trying to communicate. But
Mm.
for new communicators or for new people, it's a bit hard.
So
Uh,
yeah, that's a really interesting point. I didn't think it would balloon to this conversation with this point, but the next point is to create candor generating practices or conversations to build to share vulnerability. So Daniel suggests asking the questions that I'll be mentioning right now, in order to generate more candor or candor generate. Yeah, yeah. And so, for example, first is what were like. This would be something like post. I think John will also talk about it later, but there's these meetings after I forgot what it was, but even after so just like so there's a word in Japanese called hanseikai,
mm,
and well it's kind of just like this like reflection time after whatever activities or events that had happened, like even like after a party or something, and so let's take a party for as an example. We'll ask questions like what were our intended results, what were our actual results, what caused our results, and what will we do the same next time, and what will we do differently. And even just from these 5 questions, it really represents the idea of or the idea that Daniel is trying to prove or support that like it's not about there's no question about who did that or who was supposed like who or like because like there's no hierarchy mentioned, there's no like a really social key or whatever. It's like it's just the goal, like what were we trying to do, like what happened, what didn't go well, and like forget about hierarchy or status or reputation, whatever. Just like well, what I'm trying to say. So our only focus is like getting something done or doing better, and this naturally produces more honesty because like you start to forget, you start to become the kids that were making marshmallows. It's like oh no, we need to do this. I don't know, sorry, it's not as grand as I thought it was when I first thought of this, but it's a good reminder to kind of remember keep ourselves on track of asking the questions that propel us into doing better rather than blaming or talking about responsibility is important too. Anyways, yeah, moving on. Last point about showing vulnerability happens to be something about making leaders disappear. And this, I'm not sure how it directly relates to vulnerability, but my interpretation of making leaders disappear, making teams successful, is that I think it's kind of like I think the best team is a group full of followers that are also capable of being leaders. And I I think this is important because not every situation is gonna demand you to be a follower, and not every situation is gonna demand you to be a leader. And it's important to adapt based on the situation. And there's one example in well, I think I'm not too familiar with this, but like the military, I'm not sure which military section, but like the training, the PTs and the trainings that the soldiers go through. I know I think it was in the book too, but they they train soldiers to become self thinkers in situations that, like, so they give them in trainings they give them really difficult or like impossible tasks, and it forces the soldiers to think for themselves, because if they were just followers they would kind of brute force into completing the task. But I guess since if they have to think for themselves, as in like being a leader, because they're kind of synonymous, they realize that it's impossible to do something to do complete a task without breaking some rules that were imposed earlier. And so teams that can think for themselves while following orders, I think is a best mix of the two characteristics. And I think that's why making leaders disappear is more, in a sense, like a test to see if the team is self-sustainable or sustained. And I think I know that Greg Popovich which is an NBA player, or NBA coach, sometimes deliberately gets ejected from the game so that the team has to come together and think and stand on their own feet and work it out. I'm not sure if it's like true, but I might have heard it somewhere, so I thought maybe, who knows. I feel like he would do that, something like that. Yeah, and so that was chapter 2, and then about sharing vulnerabilities. Chapter 3 about establishing purpose. I think, John, we kind of talked over this earlier too, but it's kind of self-explanatory, and basically define, rank, and over-communicate your priorities, and share that with your teammates. In that way, you get to we have heuristics to follow in one cohesive direction, and that will make it sum. It'll be the sum of the parts are greater than the individuals or something. I always can't say that phrase. I always forget. But you guys, since you're laughing, you probably understand what I'm saying, and everyone else that's listening. But yeah, that was thank you guys for listening. And no, I'm kidding. That was a long reflection, but John, I'm ready to pass it on to you.
Thank you. So I'm just saying this from my first part of the summary. It's ordinary people can create a performance far beyond the sum of their parts. At least from the book. But I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so I rated this book 8+ out of 10 because I knew it was better than 8, but I wasn't really sure if it was as good as 8.5. So, just like the letter grading system, I added a plus to show my extra rating points.
Yeah.
Higher than an 8.
Yeah.
But lower than a 8.5. Anyways,
lower than 9 minus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like right before 9 minus.
Yeah, right before 9 minus, yeah.
Got it.
So as a whole, what I got out of this book was, I'll although this might be a reiteration of the main points, was number one, to welcome people more. Number two, be open with our vulnerabilities and honest with what we believe in. And number three, stay goal oriented as a default, as doing all of this will eliminate the bad apples, attract like minds, and get things done effectively at a group scale. So, and reading this book was pretty satisfying because these are pretty much the characteristics that I believed in but never verbalized. I had a sensation of, or similar set of values that Daniel Coyle presents in this book. But yeah, so all the characteristics that are in here, I would definitely implement whenever I lead or be a part of a bigger group. Yeah, and the important things that stuck to me, the important concepts that stuck to me were, the first one is the Allen curve, which talked about the relationship between physical proximity and frequency of interaction. Yeah, so the closer you get, the more interaction, the more frequent you interact with another person, and as a result, the higher performance and higher creativity and innovations you can come up with. And I thought this was difficult to do, especially now because of our COVID situation. So I wondered how this affected a lot of the. I wondered how like already successful groups catered their process of their proximity, or the Allen, based on the Allen curve. Another point was to preview future connections. I'm sure Likai talked about a lot of these, and I do agree with him a lot. But just to remind myself that to have a clear image or destination of where the group is heading, or where our action is headed toward, is kind of like not only it maintains your mental stability, it also boosts your motivation to get to that point, even though the odds may seem tremendous. And sharing this with your group mates, like Likai said, is really it's a form of it's a form of a belonging cue, I think. So regarding sharing vulnerability, I recently had the experience of sharing my vulnerability to establish a common ground for an interaction between a friend that I met for the first time. And after being able to set this, by the way, the vulnerability that we shared was the worst things that we've ever done. After I was able to establish that foundation, we were able to delve deeper into our conversations and, as a result, relationship. And yeah, now we meet more often and talk more often. So, and at a deeper level than a normal friend. So I really felt the power of this vulnerability principle.
Can I add something?
Mm-hmm.
As always, I think I mentioned earlier about like previewing future connections with you and talking about going to grad program and stuff like that. And I first thought, well, we're not necessarily in a group like you, John, and I, like at least back then. And so I was like, does it really connect or relate to our point? But I think it does relate because our brains are like susceptible to those cues and like reactions, just kind of like the influence book that we read in the first episode. How like our brain doesn't distinguish like what's like what the context, but more like if as long as you get the cue, the stimulation, it'll still trigger something in your mind. And so like sharing this vulnerability part with your friend, it makes sense even though you two like aren't necessarily doing something as a team or as a, like in a typical sense. But then you can recalibrate and like look at it in a different way, saying that, well, you two, the relationship between you and your friend is kind of like a team or like a goal in itself of like going towards the same like friendly relationship is one goal that you guys are going towards, and by sharing vulnerability you guys are able to connect better. And so I think I just want to make the point that it doesn't necessarily have to be teams. It can be an individual basis, or even in an even odder, more odd situations, as long as like the cues are there, the vulnerability sharing or the safety is there, purpose is there, it kind of still functions in our mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It really seems like the fundamental principle for just human interaction in general, not specific to a group. Right. So regarding establishing purpose, I really like Pixar's brain trust meetings. So what a brain trust meeting is, they do this type of meeting where a frank, candid type of meeting where they test screen the movie that they just made, and they pretty much tear it down into bits, like being super critical about it and being open to each other regardless of their social status. And they do this to improve the film, not with the objective of respecting their elderlies or people higher up in rank than them. So yeah, I thought this was a really good example of having a goal-oriented mentality in a group setting. It was also relieving to know that even Pixar's first films are shitty. As someone who likes to make stuff myself, it's really demotivating to see my first draft because they tend to be shitty too. I guess this in itself is a belonging cue. Like, it provides me safety, knowing that Pixar says all our movies suck at first. I don't know, but yeah, it also motivates me to keep adding on to that draft. In the book, he talks about different types of purpose settings. So the first one is proficiency based, where he talks about, which is more like logistic based, where they follow specific principles. But for creative purposes, like Pixar's, he lists a kind of different set of exercises, which are hire people smarter than you, fail early, fail often, listen to everyone's ideas, face towards the problems. B-level work is bad for your soul, which is similar to what I just talked about. And it's more important to invest in good people than in good ideas. So it's more oriented towards the individual motivation compared to holistic group motivation, compared which was for the proficiency purpose setting. And I really resonated with this idea and wanted to implement certain parts of my life, especially because I recently also had an example of working for an alluring or like attractive project, but just had the wrong people working. And that really drained me. So yeah, this just reminds me to focus more on the people instead of just the ideas. And on the same note of just establishing purposes, the principle preview future connections and reinforce purpose with artifacts was something that I wanted to implement right away, because I tend to lose sight of goals in the noise of just mundane life. So I had the conversation with Lee Kai too, but I try to keep things in my room to remind myself of these important things that I want to and need to, but end up forgetting. To just boost that motivation back, because yeah, there's like a, I don't know how long specifically, but around a 2 week span of
Mm.
me establishing a goal and being really motivated about it, and then slowly declining into
Mm-hmm.
a pit of demotivation. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I should get a tattoo or something, but just something like a poster or something
Right.
that will remind me of where I want to get to. Or just talking to people like Likai helps too, but something that's constant is, I thought, is what I need. So
Mm.
this was a good reminder for that.
You know what's another good reminder is a desktop screensaver. In college, when I was studying organic chemistry, I put my periodic table onto
Ooh,
the back of the.
oh, nice.
I also had a. This was not because I was studying, but it just kind of coincidentally I had a mug, coffee mug, with the periodic table,
Hmm.
wrapped as the design of it. So
Yava.
it's nice. It was nice.
なるほどね.
I wouldn't say it's like it helped. It's more like reference. I was like when I was doing assignments, I was like, oh, rather than searching it up, I can just look at my desktop. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a quick access to that reference.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it's functioning as that.
Yeah.
So the last thing that I found important from this book was the characteristic of the members of these significant groups. So the key thing about the people that belong to these successful groups is that they weren't really aware of their deeds that made the group culturally significant. And this might sound cynical, but for the lack of better words, I think that a part of the success came from chance and just people being the right place, the right people being in the right place at the right time. So it'll be hard for us to try to intentionally reproduce what they did from scratch. But this book provides us the opportunity to be aware of these principles, and it shows us guidelines to help us internalize and practice it. So simply reading this, I think, increases your chances of finding success in a group setting. So it's kind of like the artifact that can reinforce desirable results in a group setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so far with the books we've read, kind of I guess it works for everything, but I mean, the more you learn, the more you are aware of these stuff in the day-to-day life, and you can use it to your advantage, or so it's good that we are able to learn and kind of talk about it and share with people so that we all can benefit from these great authors, because credits to them for figuring this out for us.
Or assembling it into this shape.
Yeah. And I think about this success, people born into success is a topic that's also mentioned in Outliers, which is next week's book, and I think we will be able to talk more about it next week, about how some people are just destined to succeed. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. But with that said, we will now move on to Q&A. And welcome back to our Q&A section. So this week, or just to recap for everyone, Q&A section is where we kind of prepare questions for each other, and this week we have one in particular, like kind of like last week too, and this week is more personal. It's what is call and responses priorities, and we ask this because chapter 3 was about establishing purpose and over communicating that with your team. And call and response is a project that we both are in this. John and I are in this together, and we consider it seriously. And this is our project as a team. So I think it's a good place to start and add our little storytelling here. But yeah, so John, I might ask you, since you're here, what is call and responses priorities?
Um, so we started off with reading for ourselves, and as a method of doing that, we decided to share it to other people, and hopefully they would get something out of it as well. And in the process of sharing it, hopefully connect with like-minded or people who are curious about similar things. But we actually had a meeting after recording the third episode, the episode on digital minimalism, and we shared what we felt about the recording because we were all somewhat dissatisfied with the result. So we sat down and talked about what happened, just similar to, I don't know, the brain trust meeting at Pixar. We broke down what we thought was bad, thought was good, and came to the conclusion that we were simply reiterating the summary of the book. Like, that was all we were doing. And that wasn't really adding much value. People can just search it up online or read the books themselves. And that would be it. But we wanted to add a twist or incorporate ourselves into what we learned from the book. So it'll be one, easier for the audience to listen to and relate to, and it'll be easier for us to remember the content by internalizing what we learned. So after establishing that, we reshot the previous episode, if you guys didn't notice, based on this calibrated purpose. So yeah, I think we just had a pretty recent but important update of our priorities, I guess.
Yeah, and our and part of our reason to invite everyone to join us is because it goes along with our intended purpose of putting our own personal stories and opinions and kind of adding it on top of the stories that are told in the books. And so the more the merrier. So if we can have more people sharing their stories, it's just more we can learn from each other. And so once again, please think about it. And I wanted to also add how there were actually some, now thinking back, some traits that we follow, or the rules that we follow that Daniel talks about. And so first one is about the creating a candor generating practices, such as asking what were the intended results, what were our actual results, what caused our results, what we'll do the same next time, and what we'll do differently. And I think it's pretty much the same thing as what John said a little bit earlier about our third episode of digital minimalism. We went back and said, are we really doing what we're trying to do, which is adding our own story, or we're still trying to figure out what our purpose is too. I mean, we're also welcome, or we're open to extending our purpose to different missions or objectives, but we calibrated after our call, and so I was surprised to see, actually we are asking about our results and how we can do differently. Another part that I thought we were doing was one of the actions for creative groups is to fail early and fail often, and I really enjoy working with John and other people like Ashley last week because it's we don't mind sucking at first. We don't have like the proper equipment or like we don't have a studio like the Joe Rogan podcast, but we're okay with that. And our recording is on Zoom. It's not like individually shot video. So
And our structure of the podcast is still somewhat changing, volatile.
yeah, but I'm glad we're on the same page, and that we think there's things that we won't know and that we can't fix and learn unless we encounter them after making the mistakes. So
Mm.
I thought we were failing well early and failing well
Mm.
often.
Mm.
So, and the last thing was hiring people smarter than you. And this is shout out for Johnny Boy because he is the best summarizer of the books we've read, and he's the best editor of the video and audios that we have when we share it on YouTube and Anchor. So a round of applause for everyone. And I also will have a reaction here that will say clap. And I will also have another reaction called celebrate or ta-da. Yes. Yes, I hear applause from the audience too. But yeah, that's about it. I think on top of that, doing this podcast helps us internalize our stories too. So, we have the audience to thank as well, because they are helping us internalizing the stories.
Their presence.
Kana? Their presence, yes.
Mm.
I can still hear them clapping for you, John.
We gotta give a round of applause for Elite Guy too for giving his insightful reflections on each chapter of every single book.
I think I went over like 40 minutes just with my own reflection, which was I'll promise to make it more concise, but yeah. With that said, anything else, Johnny Boy?
Yeah, so we are still in the we still suck. We are still in the shitty draft phase. So we
Yes.
appreciate any form of feedback, even okay, maybe don't just comment like this sucks, but like give us like why it sucks, why it's good, keep this, don't just leave this out, improve this, keep this kind of thing, like anything, because we want to improve and make this bigger and involve more people, for just everyone gets to learn in the process. So
yeah, and yeah, like this sucks is fine too. It just gives more weight to the severity of our suckiness.
yeah.
And so it's fine. And what was I gonna say?
That's good.
Yeah, totally forgot. But that's nothing new about me. Okay. Next week will be Outliers by Johnny Boy. Oh, yes,
Malcolm
there you go.
Gladwell.
He will be our second guest, or second time joining our podcast.
Yeah, he's the same author as David and Goliath.
Yeah.
めっちゃ面白い。
And then we'll most likely update our schedule pretty soon again, and then we'll create our Twitter account very soon. ということで、今日も私、ウーリー会と
Atanacioジョンでした。
はいそして今日も皆さん聞いてくださってありがとうございました。
Okay.
Well, okay. Thank you everyone, and please stay safe.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.